Welcome to Weather Extra. I'm First Alert Meteorologist Jillian Johnson. The past week was brutally hot across central Texas. In fact, we had excessive heat warnings in place 4 days in a row. Before entering last week, we only had 11 100-degree days for the entire summer, but we then entered the hottest stretch of weather we faced all year long and went on a streak of triple-digit temperatures for more than a week. Here behind me is a look at some of the hottest temperatures recorded at Waco Regional Airport last week. On Monday, August the 19th, highs reached up to 104 degrees. They rose even more on Tuesday as we climbed up to 105, which is the hottest temperature recorded so far this year at Waco Regional. Temperatures went back down only by 1 degree on Wednesday and remained at 104 on Thursday. Now, this brutal heat is dangerous for anyone who spends long periods of time outdoors. And with kids back in school and football season just around the corner, the University Interscholastic League's regulations for student athletes training outdoors in this brutal heat has changed in hopes to keep all that are practicing or playing outdoors safe in these conditions. Some school districts are using the Perry Weather app, which alerts sports departments about the heat and safety precautions staff should take depending on the school district's heat stress policies. News 10's Jasmine Lotz has more on what trainers are saying about this.
I spoke with the athletic department at McGregor ISD, who say this is a vital tool to guarantee athletes' safety while they're out there in this heat. I'm told even though not every school district is able to use this resource, staff predicts the app will become even more popular in the future.
Tackling the heat can be difficult for some athletes.
Texas always brings a unique challenge when it comes to August.
McGregor ISD athletic trainer Chelsea Hooten says this is why she appreciates the UIL having regulations in place to ensure athletes don't overheat while training outside.
Ready, hit!
The UIL has different regulations depending on how high the temperature gets. For example, if the heat reaches level yellow, that means players must have 3 separate breaks each hour. Level orange requires athletes to practice for 2 hours, with football and field hockey players being restricted to helmets and shoulder pads. Level red means practice for 1 hour, and level black means either no outdoor practice or delayed practices.
It's a protection barrier, basically.
An extra layer of protection is by using the Perry Weather app. Based on a school district's guidelines, it will send automatic heat stress policy alerts to your phone. Hooten says she's required to check the app 15 minutes before practice and 30 minutes into practice to know what type of regulations staff needs to take.
Everybody who is on your app system will get that same alert. So our middle school, our high school, all of the people get the same thing, so everybody's on the same page and it's very easy to communicate, hey, what we're doing for practice today.
From supporting athletes to setting up cooling stations, Hooten says it's her job to make sure the team is safe as possible.
It protects not only the student athletes out there and make sure that we aren't kind of overworking them and overstressing their bodies so that they can perform at their best, but also protecting spectators and our coaching staff.
Hooten told me the Perry Weather app can gather data by pinging off the nearest weather station. I'm told for McGregor ISD, the nearest weather station is in Woodway, about 8 miles from the district. In the studio, Jasmine Lotz, KWTX News 10.
The Perry Weather app uses on-site sensors to measure the wet bulb globe temperature, which is another way to measure how the weather feels. For more on what the wet bulb globe temperature is compared to heat index, here's First Alert meteorologist Sean Bellafury.
Central Texans are no stranger to the dangers of heat and humidity this time of year, and that is why we take a look at the heat index and the wet bulb globe temperature. But to understand both of those, we have to understand the human body a little bit. Why do we sweat? Well, our bodies like to stay approximately around 98.6 degrees. So when the body temperature rises, like when we're outside in these triple-digit temperatures, sweat is released from our skin. Now, that sweat starts to evaporate off of your skin. It's one of the reasons why when you step out of the shower in the morning, you feel a little bit cool. That's the evaporative cooling taking place. But on muggy days, sweat fails to evaporate, keeping you warmer and leaving you with that sticky feeling. So whenever we have a high heat index, especially when we're talking about a high humidity value, your body cannot effectively cool off. The heat index, it's a measure of human perceived temperature in the shade, and it only takes into account temperature and humidity, doesn't account for the sun angle, wind, or cloud coverage. We had a heat index of 114 in Temple on August 22nd at 4 p.m. That was very high. So what does that and wet bulb globe temperature terms? Well, the wet bulb globe temperature is a much simpler formula that accounts for temperature, humidity, sunlight, and wind speed. It's then divided into 5 risk categories with a wet bulb globe temperature of 90 degrees or above. That is stressing your body if you're in that after just 15 minutes of time. So let's calculate it. 105 for a temperature on August 22nd with a dew point of 70 degrees. Felt like 114, but let's plug in those numbers for the wet bulb globe temperature. Here we go, all the way up to 105. The dew point, a comfortable 70 degrees. No cloud coverage and about a 6-mile-per-hour wind. So we see the heat index, that is down to 114 degrees. The wet bulb globe temperature 91 degrees, which would put it solidly in the extreme category when it only takes 15 minutes for heat to stress your body. Reporting in the studio, Sean Bellafiore, KWTX News 10.
Although last week was extremely hot for us in Central Texas, it still does not compare to what we went through during the summer months in 2023. The month of June last year started out fairly pleasant. The first 100-degree day of 2023 fell on Saturday, June 10th. In comparison to this year, our first triple-digit day fell on the 27th. In total, we picked up 5 100-degree days in June of 2023, where this year we only recorded 2. Temperatures did begin to increase late in the month of June, and that trend continued into July. Now, throughout the 31 days of July last year, only 1 featured cooler than normal temperatures. 23 triple-digit days were recorded at Waco Regional Airport throughout July of 2023, with 6 of those days receiving temperatures of 105 degrees or hotter. This year, our July was fairly pleasant, and we only recorded 1 100-degree day. Unfortunately, that was not the worst of the heat last year. Last August was absolutely brutal for us in Central Texas. Out of the 31 days in the month, 28 of them featured triple-digit highs. Now, the worst part of all of that was out of those 28 days, 20 of them saw high temperatures of 105 degrees or hotter. Last summer, the hottest temperature recorded was 110 degrees, and that occurred on August 20th and again on the 25th. Throughout June, July, and August of last year, Waco Regional Airport saw 55 100-degree days. Now, on average, we see about 24 triple-digit days in a year, so we were definitely well above the average throughout the summertime months. On average, Central Texas's last 100-degree day falls on August 29th, but the triple-digit heat carried over into the month of September. We had another brutal stretch of heat as we made our way through the first 9 days of September, but thankfully for the middle of the month, we actually saw an early taste of fall. But the summer heat was not done with Central Texas just yet, as we saw another 100-degree day on the 24th of September. That ended up being our last triple-digit day of 2023. We saw a number of broken records and streaks throughout the summer last year. In total, Waco Regional Airport saw 66 100-degree days from June 10th through September 24th. Those 66 days in a single calendar year allowed us to enter the number 3 spot for greatest annual 100-degree days. This upcoming week is the final week of August, and before you know it, we'll be saying happy first day of fall. September 1st, which takes place next Sunday, is the start to meteorological fall. Now, the astronomical start to fall will be on Sunday, September 22nd at 7:43 in the morning. In Central Texas, as far as the normal temperatures go for the month, we start to see a nice decline in both afternoon highs and morning lows. On the first of the month, the average high is 95 degrees, but falls to 87 by the end of the month. Morning lows on average start out at around 71 on the 1st and fall to a cool 62 by the 30th. Now, on average, we should normally say goodbye to the triple-digit heat in late August, but triple-digit temperatures are very common for us in Central Texas in September. In fact, record highs every single day in the month are 100 degrees or hotter. The hottest temperature ever recorded in the month of September was 111 degrees on September 4th of 2000, and the coldest temperature recorded was 39 degrees back in 1942 on the 27th. As far as rainfall goes, on average, Central Texas should see 2.87 inches of rainfall throughout the 30 days of September. The record wettest September was back in 1913 when over 11 inches fell at Waco Regional Airport. Well, straight ahead on Weather Extra, we take a look back at last week's full moon, the first supermoon of the year. And we'll also hear from some of the family members of Butch Wilmore, one of the astronauts who's currently stuck in space. Welcome back to Weather Extra. Last week, we were gifted with an exceptional treat. An extraordinary blue supermoon filled the night sky across the globe. CBS's Leah Mishkin explains the rare occurrence from London.
Bright above the Sydney Opera House, rising above the Eiffel Tower and the Temple of Poseidon. The rare blue supermoon is being photographed by crowds all over the world. This is the first supermoon of 2024.
And it was impressively orange here in London.
Dr. Ed Bloomer is Senior Astronomy Manager at Royal Museums Greenwich. He says its orange appearance is not what makes it a supermoon.
And around the world, there's been a few things like, say, like wildfires, putting a lot of kind of smoke up in the air. There's pollution as well. And also when it's low on the horizon, a bit like when we're getting sunset and we're getting the reddening of the sky.
So what is a supermoon? According to NASA, it's when the moon is at or near its closest point to Earth at the same time as it is full, making it look larger.
It's an optical illusion, which is kind of interesting.
This supermoon is also a blue moon, not because of its color, but because of when it falls on the calendar.
Generally speaking, it's the third full moon in an astronomical season.
And how rare is that to have the two occur at the same time?
They sometimes come in clusters, but it's pretty rare.
Inspiring many to look up. Leah Mishkin, CBS News, London.
Over the past few weeks, we've been following the journey of two astronauts who are stuck in space, at least for now. Butch Wilmore and Suni Williams arrived at the International Space Station back in June for what was supposed to be about a one-week stay. But the spacecraft that brought them to space may not be able to safely bring them back home, and they could be stuck there at the ISS until early next year. Now, obviously, this is hard for the astronauts, but what about their family members back here on Earth? Well, Sam Luther spoke with Butch Wilmore's family and shares their perspective.
On June 5th, the Wilmore family watches their dad and husband launched into space for an 8-day mission. It turned into much more.
You know, we sort of don't expect him until probably February or March.
Butch Wilmore's wife Deanna and kids, 19-year-old Darren and 16-year-old Logan, are preparing to be without Wilmore for at least another 6 months, a delayed return because of concerns over the Boeing Starliner's thrusters.
We are actually doing thruster testing as we speak.
The analyzing of the data with the thrusters, and that, you have people that some think it's okay, some think it's not okay.
This family is still able to FaceTime Wilmore several times a day.
It is so cool. He gives us a lot of Earth views. I especially like seeing the sunset.
An 8-day trip turning into 8 months isn't what Wilmore had planned, but his wife Deanna says he's staying positive.
He just takes it knowing the Lord's in control, and that since the Lord's in control of it, that he's content where he is.
However, Wilmore will likely miss Christmas, he and his wife's 30th wedding anniversary, and most of Logan's senior year in high school, and several theater performances from Darren. While they'll miss him, this family is proud of the UT grad.
All of my college friends call him Astro Dad. It's kind of a joke that we're all like his little fan club.
They're not frustrated because they know there's nothing they can do to change the outcome, taking it one day at a time while Wilmore continues his work at the International Space Station, still uncertain of when he'll come home.
Yeah, you just sort of have to roll with it, and you sort of expect the unexpected.
In this week's episode of Degrees of Science, Brady Taylor spoke with a Canadian researcher that recently finished a groundbreaking 6-year research project that answered key questions about celiac disease, which has opened the door to potential drugs that could treat the disease. We'll have a listen into their conversation right after this.
Today we're talking with Dr. Elena Verdu. She's the director of the Health Research Institute at McMaster University. So, Dr. Verdu, for people that may not know, what exactly is celiac?
So celiac disease is an autoimmune condition. It's an autoimmune disease, which means that our own immune system is going to attack our own tissues. And so in celiac disease, that target tissue is the upper part of the small intestine, and specifically the lining of the gut. Now, I'm going to call epithelium. And what happens is that that lining of the gut has like finger-like projections that are important to absorb the nutrients from the food we eat. And in celiac disease, that immune-mediated attack will lead to a blunting of those finger-like projections, and that is going to cause many clinical abnormalities, such as, for example, malabsorption and other types of symptoms. And so to have celiac disease, we need two factors. We need to have certain genes, and you need to consume gluten. Gluten is a driver of the immune response.
So is there any way that people can treat this other than taking gluten out of their diet?
Right now, there are no drugs in the market that you can take. And the only treatment is, as you have mentioned, to completely avoid gluten in your diet. And that, as many people know, it's very difficult to do.
So you've been working as part of a 6-year project to try to figure out exactly how and where this gluten response is happening. Some groundbreaking research. What did y'all find out with this?
Let me first explain what are the processes by which you have inflammation in celiac disease. It has been known for a long time that we need the genes and we need gluten. And so what happens there? Why are these two factors necessary? We know that these genes are going to encode for a molecule that is expressed in immune cells, and they are called antigen-presenting cells because that's what they do. They present antigens to other immune cells. And in celiac disease, it makes gluten more visible to the immune cells that now recognize it, and they are going to have the immune response that ends up in damaging the upper lining of the gut. What we asked was, well, in order for that to happen, gluten needs to get through the intestinal wall and in contact with the immune cells, with these antigen-presenting cells. So could it be that the lining of the intestine that has cells that don't belong to the immune system also can express these molecules and activate the immune response already there at the interface between the environment and the inside of the body, which is the immune system? So the first thing we did was to take tiny tissues, pieces of tissue from patients with active celiac disease. You do that's called a biopsy, and you do it through a procedure that is called an endoscopy. And to measure that these molecules were actually the presenting molecules of gluten were actually present in the gut lining, in the epithelium. So the second step was to build this isolated system where we only had cells from the epithelium that also only expressed the molecule to C gluten. We then measured the immune reaction, and we saw that there was an enhanced reaction when we added gluten to the system. And so we answered clearly the question that the epithelium, if it expresses this celiac molecule and you have gluten in the mixture and immune cells that will recognize that gluten in the antigen-presenting cells, you will have an immune response.
Do you think that y'all's discovery and the research you've done could lead to where maybe there could be a medicine that could treat this other than just trying to cut gluten out?
So there are many drugs now currently in clinical trial design, and they haven't been approved. They have to be tested in humans, but they are already showing promising results. So I believe that there will be, in the next 5-10 years, a drug in the market that will help patients with celiac disease to navigate and to live with this disease.
To hear more about this groundbreaking celiac research in this week's Degrees of Science, scan the QR code on your screen to watch on YouTube or go to kwtx.com/degreesofscience. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Weather Extra. It's not every day someone stumbles across mammoth remains from thousands of years ago, but that's exactly what happened to one Central Texan. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Tarleton State Geoscience Department, and the Waco Mammoth National Monument are now all working together to safely dig up these fossils. News 10's Isabella Quintanilla went to the site to do a little digging of her own.
Back in June, Sabrina Solomon was just out on the lake fishing with a friend when she quite literally stumbled upon these.
I was walking up that hill with all the clay. It was really wet and slippery and ended up falling and coming face to face with the specimen.
She noticed they looked strange and had a feeling that what she had found were more than just rocks.
I told my best friend, I was like, it's dinosaur bones, you know. We thought it was actually like a spine to something. That's what it looked like to us.
So she alerted the park, and when Jared Briscoe, the lead park ranger for the lake where the bones were found, got a look at them, he immediately reached out to Tarleton State's Geoscience Department.
I made kind of an initial determination that I thought it was a mammoth whenever I got here, just based on my limited knowledge.
To confirm, Tarleton's Geoscience Department sent out Chris Jutinen, an instructor for the department.
What I saw when I got here was about 4 or 5 inches of tusk. It was pretty clear this was a mammoth.
He rounded up some students and got Dr. Lindsay Yan with the Waco Mammoth National Monument to come out and help with the excavation. Once they had an entire crew on site, it didn't take long to discover more bones.
There's part of what may be a skull, there's a radius or part of an arm bone, and part of some of the spinal bones.
From the bones alone, they determined this was a 40-year-old male Columbian mammoth from roughly 20,000 years ago, similar to the ones on display at the Waco Mammoth site.
It's so hard to imagine them walking through your backyard. So every time we find one in your backyard, it kind of triggers the imagination. And even a small find like this and the other finds in this area, they really tell us about the paleontological history of this area.
According to Jutinen, as the bones are removed from the ground, they will head to Tarleton State to be preserved and studied for years to come. Reporting in Bosque County, Isabella Quintanilla, KWTX News 10.
Thankfully, the upcoming work week will not be as hot as last week here in Central Texas. Triple-digit temperatures will be making a comeback as we move through the final week of August. That's all we have for you on this week's episode of Weather Extra. We'll see you right back here next weekend.